Hello and welcome back to my channel, or for many of you, welcome for the very first time. Firstly, thank you for 400 subscribers. This is absolutely wild to me. I never would have anticipated that this many people would be like following along with my journey and wanting to learn about climbing and mountaineering. And I'm so excited to delve into like so many new ideas I have. But today we're going to be starting a new series or series of series, so many ideas, talking about climbing and mountaineering. As a quick disclaimer, I do have a script that I'm going to be reading from and working off of because I want to make sure that I get all this information condensed really well, and when I try to just see, this part right here is not scripted, and you're seeing how badly I'm doing. My brain moves too fast for my mouth, and none of this would get done if there was not a script. So I will be reading from a script just for full transparency. If you caught any of my TikToks a few weeks back, I made one info dumping video about Nimsdai and his 14-7 project, and y'all were so fascinated. You had so many questions that now I get to just info dump about my special interests. So this is really exciting for me. We're going to talk about a lot of things over the course of, honestly, years, depending on your interest, because I have so much interest and knowledge, and because there's constantly new things going on in mountaineering. And so there's so much to talk about. We're going to talk about history, disasters, ethical practices, incredible feats, things like high mountain rescue and why it's so difficult, which has been one of the biggest questions that you have had, and why it's so hard to recover deceased climbers. We're going to go into all of that. We're going to talk about the role of Sherpas and the issues that they have with the climbing community, as well as the complex relationship that many of the communities that live around these mountains have with climbers. And there's so much more that we're going to cover. But today, in order to give you a better understanding moving forward, I thought we'd cover some of the basics, like how do people climb these big mountains? What is the death zone? And why does it take months to do these climbs? So firstly, what is the death zone? The death zone is generally considered to start at an altitude of 8,000 meters or 26,000 feet, and it's where the atmospheric pressure is insufficient to sustain human life for an extended period of time. Now, there's a lot of science and information that goes into why the human body functions best at certain atmospheric pressures that frankly, I don't understand, and I'm not qualified to explain to you. But the underlying information that you need to know is that your body starts dying at a cellular level in the death zone. This means that a large part of climbing these 8,000 meter mountains is acclimatizing your body. When you're acclimatizing, you're teaching your body how to function at higher altitudes. You manufacture more red blood cells, your heart rate increases, and things like digestion efficiency are reduced in favor of your heart pumping more blood through your body. And you do things like breathe a lot faster and harder. If you've ever seen a video of climbers who are climbing in these big mountains, you may notice that they sound super winded, but that's just because their acclimatization is working. And also, they're probably super winded. These mountains are freaking grueling. Acclimatization is important because without it, you run the risk of a multitude of altitude sicknesses that can kill you before you even realize you're sick. In the death zone, it's not possible for your body to acclimatize. You have to breathe so hard that you cannot get enough oxygen in quickly enough. It's not possible for you to replenish your oxygen stores, and that will cause your body to start shutting down in phases, eventually leading to unconsciousness and then death. Many of the deaths on these mountains have been attributed to issues in the death zone, whether it's due to equipment malfunctions or clouded decision making due to lack of oxygen, or misplaced footing because you can't think clearly. That's definitely not all of it though. We'll get into more. All of the 8,000 meter mountains fall in either the Himalaya or Karakoram ranges. I was gonna go into the ways that the ranges were formed because it's actually really interesting and is kind of like this one gigantic mountain range that you can see from space, but then I realized I might be nerding out a little bit too hard, so let me know if you're interested in that. Anyway, to get to the base camp of any of these mountains is going to involve a 1 to 2 week trek on foot, and the trek is going to look very different depending on which mountain you're going to. In this video, the two examples I'm going to use are Everest, which is also known as Chomolungma in Tibet, which means mother of the world, or Sagarmatha in Nepal, which has multiple meanings, and K2, which is also known as Chagori in China. In every case possible, I'll be using the local names for these mountains, and we'll make sure to clarify which ones I'm talking about, because respecting the original names of these mountains is one of the most basic things that we can do to decolonize mountaineering. If you don't know, the majority of the names that these mountains go by were given by white surveyors who discovered them years later. The reason I'm going to be using these two mountains in particular is because they're the two highest in the world and the most well-known, and because they have very different treks and climbs that will illustrate a lot of the differences. In the future, we will be getting into the details of all 14 of the 8,000ers, as well as many smaller mountains, so don't fret, this is just where we're starting. The trek to base camp, while obviously necessary to get to the mountain, is also your first step in acclimatization. The base camps for both Sagarmatha and Chagori are higher than the peak of the tallest mountain in the lower 48 states. It generally takes between 1 and 2 weeks to get to base camp from your starting point. Sagarmatha has 2 main treks, one starting in Kathmandu and one starting in Lukla, both in Nepal, and Chagori's base camp trek begins in the village of Askol in Pakistan. Now, if you're heading to Sagarmatha, you're going to be trekking through tiny villages that are known for their hospitality, food, and tea houses. It's one of the biggest draws of people doing the base camp treks for the Himalayan mountains. This means that packing in is a lot lighter if you're climbing there because you have access to meals, water, and you can pick up supplies such as fresh fruits and vegetables as well as bread in the local villages on the way to base camp. When you're trekking through the Karakoram range, there's nothing of the sort. You and your team have to ensure that you have enough food, water, and supplies for the trek in and out, as well as the entire climb. This is just one of the many reasons that Chagori is considered much harder to climb than Sagarmatha. Once you arrive and set up at base camp, your true acclimatization begins. But before you can do any climbing, you participate in a special puja. A puja refers to a few different types of Hindu ceremonial worship to honor the gods and goddesses, and in this case, it's a ceremony performed by locals in order to ask the goddesses of the mountains to protect the climber's journey. It's apparently incredibly powerful and one of the best overall experiences on the mountain. After the puja, your climb can begin. Depending on the company or group you're climbing with, you'll generally spend about 2 weeks at base camp getting acclimatized. This also includes dealing with any stomach bugs or any other things that often strike climbers when they're first arriving so that their bodies can adjust. After this, you'll spend 4 to 6 weeks climbing and acclimatizing. This involves repeatedly climbing up to establish higher camps and then coming back down to base camp. Establishing higher camps means tents, extra oxygen and equipment, and other things that they'll need. This has led to some unethical climbers stealing oxygen and supplies from other people's established camps when they're not actively staying there, but there's really no other option. At base camp, usually there will be a team of Sherpas that keep camp running and make all of the food so that exhausted climbers can rest and recover during their acclimatization. Sherpas are and have been the heart of these mountains for years, and we have so much to discuss in regards to them. They deserve your utmost respect and reverence. As for food, no life is sustained this high, so there's no foraging or ability to hunt for survival. You have to bring absolutely everything with you. For water, you can melt down snow and ice and keep them in freeze-resistant hydration packs. NASA actually makes them, and they're partially catered to climbers specifically. Carrying in enough water for the expedition would be such an unbelievable amount of weight and waste that doesn't need to be on the mountain. And speaking of waste, I will be doing a video all about that because waste in these big mountains is a huge issue that has still not been properly addressed. As for food, things like dried meats, nuts, oatmeal, things like Spam and anchovies, eggs, cheese, sometimes chocolate, local vegetables, lots of coffee, like so much coffee, energy bars, soup, energy gel, protein supplements, rice, and lentils are what seem to be the most common. Meals that involve higher levels of preparation are usually done at base camp, and then snacks, non-perishables, and highly nutrient-dense, easy options are saved for the higher camps where you have less energy and cooking gets trickier. Oatmeal and dried meats are two huge staples, and many climbers will bring a special summit treat with them, like a Snickers bar or something to commemorate their summit. And after weeks of anchovies and oatmeal and rice, that has got to be really nice. I can't even imagine. There's also usually a massive celebration with the biggest meal of the entire stay happening once climbers have returned to base camp for the final time. Now getting back to acclimatization. At the higher camps, climbers will often rotate between responsibilities. One person can be melting ice into water, one person can be working on food, and the third person can be resting. The next day, they'd rotate responsibilities to give someone else a chance to rest. This is one of the many reasons that solo climbers in these mountains have to have extra intense training because they're solely responsible for everything and they cannot let exhaustion get in the way or they won't survive. There have been stories of climbing groups helping solo climbers and inviting them in for meals and stuff like that, but it's just not a guarantee. You have to be prepared to do everything yourself. Climbers will stay at camps at higher altitudes over the course of acclimatizing. Once they're well adjusted to sleeping at Camp 1, they'll move on to Camp 2. After spending more time between Camp 1 and Camp 2, they'll sleep at Camp 3, etc. But a key component is regularly returning to base camp. There are exceptions to this acclimatization routine. For example, Alpenglow Expeditions, run by Adrian Ballinger, is known for their rapid ascent program. Known as normobaric hypoxic training, these expeditions feature climbers using an altitude tent and generator system that allows you to pre-acclimate at home before you even leave for your climb. You spend 8 hours a day for up to 8 weeks sitting in a pressurized tent in your house adjusting to the altitude you'll soon be at. On their website, they state that this allows their expeditions to take 30 to 50% less time than traditional expeditions. After you've completed what is known as your acclimatization rotation, the summit push begins. Generally, the push will take about a week, starting at base camp and ending when you return to base camp. Summit day itself varies depending on the mountain, but generally will start somewhere between 2 to 4 a.m. and will take 8 to 10 hours to reach the summit summit, then climb back down. In my reading and documentary watching over the years, it seems like many summit days even out to being 14 to 18-hour days. And part of that is because they want to get back down below the death zone. So they're not staying at the camp that they stayed at when they went to summit. They have to climb back down lower than they were. The summit push is not always successful. Many different factors come into play, and sometimes it's just not possible to safely summit whichever mountain you're climbing. There are a lot of mountaineers who will train for years for these opportunities just to luck into a bad weather window and not be able to summit. After you return to base camp, you trek back out on foot and fly back home. So 1 to 2 weeks to base camp, 4 to 5 weeks acclimatizing, 1 week summit push, 1 week home. Week no longer sounds like a word to me. Because there are so many factors that can affect how short or long your climb is, this is why you hear people say it's a 6 to 9 week window to climb an 8,000 meter mountain. If you've watched this entire video, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you learned something new. This doesn't even begin to scrape the surface of everything we're going to get into in future videos, but I thought that establishing some basic information would be a good place to start. Please let me know if you'd like a video on the kind of equipment and like training that you need for these climbs. That's a lot more technical than I thought some of you would be like interested in, so I thought I'd just ask. And let me know what else you're interested in. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, and I will either answer in the comments or I might even make a whole video based off the question, depending on what it is. If you've enjoyed this, please consider leaving a like and a comment and subscribing so that you can show YouTube that this is an up-and-coming channel that is worth watching, and I will be back next week with more mountaineering knowledge. You can also find me on Instagram and Patreon that I have linked below if you'd like to follow me elsewhere or help pay for this content creation. Right now, my only Patreon tier is just a tip tier for the stuff that I'm already creating, but I'm working on adding more tiers soon, so I'm up for any suggestions, and thank you for being here. Have a great day and go drink some water.